The text landed on my phone just as the color guard was taking their positions. I stood in the wings of the ceremony hall, dress blues pristine, for stars gleaming on each shoulder. Stars I'd earned through 28 years of service, countless deployments, and decisions that had saved thousands of lives. My hands were steady, my breathing controlled, just like before every mission I'd ever led. Women don't lead men into battle. Skipping your little promotion. Dad. I read it twice, then slipped the phone back into my pocket. The honor guard was waiting. 300 officers were assembled. The Secretary of Defense was at the podium. And somewhere in Texas, my father had chosen this moment to remind me that I'd never be enough in his eyes. General Williams, my aide Major Thompson, appeared at my elbow. "They're ready for you, ma'am." I nodded, straightened my jacket, and stepped toward the stage. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of Marine One's rotors cutting through the morning air. Every head in the ceremony hall turned toward the windows. My aide's earpiece crackled with urgent chatter. "Ma'am," Thompson's eyes widened. "Change of plans. We need to move to the airfield. Now." The next 60 minutes would change everything. Not just for me, but for the man who'd spent my entire life telling me what women couldn't do. Growing up as Colonel Jack Williams' daughter meant growing up in the shadow of a legend. My father had served 3 tours in Vietnam, earned a Silver Star and 2 Bronze Stars, and built his entire identity around being the warrior who'd seen real combat, not this modern political correctness bullshit, as he liked to say after his 3rd bourbon. Our house in Fort Bragg was a shrine to his service. Photos of him in uniform covered every wall, jumping from helicopters, leading infantry charges, shaking hands with generals. But look closely at those photos and you'd notice something. I wasn't in any of them. Not even the family ones. I was 7 when I first told him I wanted to be a soldier like him. He'd laughed, ruffled my hair, and said, "That's cute, princess. But the army's no place for girls. Maybe you could be a nurse." By the time I was 17, I'd stopped trying to convince him. I'd learned that the best response to his dismissals was silence and determination. When I received my acceptance to West Point, I didn't tell him until the night before I left. He'd stood in my doorway, arms crossed, and said, "You're making a mistake, Catherine. Women aren't built for this. You'll wash out in 6 months." I lasted 4 years. Graduated in the top 5%. Branched infantry. The first woman in my class to do so, right after they opened combat roles to women. I sent him my graduation photo. He never responded. But I kept going. Ranger School. Airborne. Air Assault. Each tab and badge I earned was met with silence from home. When I made captain and led a platoon in Afghanistan, successfully completing 47 combat missions without losing a single soldier, I called him from Bagram. "That's nice," he'd said. "But you're not really leading them into battle. You're just checking boxes for the politicians." After that, I stopped calling. I rose through the ranks faster than he ever had. Major at 8 years. Lieutenant Colonel at 14. Colonel at 18. When I pinned on my first star as a brigadier general, the youngest woman ever to do so, I stood in front of the mirror in my empty apartment and wondered if he'd finally see me as a real soldier. The invitation to my promotion ceremony had gone unanswered. Just like all the others. What he didn't know, what he'd never bothered to ask about, were the operations I'd led that never made the newspapers. The hostage rescue in Syria where I'd personally led the breach team. The counterterrorism operation in Yemen that disrupted a plot against 3 U.S. embassies. The humanitarian mission in Somalia where my tactical decisions saved an entire village from genocide. My soldiers didn't follow me because of politics or quotas. They followed me because I'd bled with them, carried them when they fell, and never asked them to do anything I wouldn't do myself. They followed me because I'd earned it. 3 days before my promotion to full general and appointment as deputy commander of CENTCOM, I'd received a call from the Pentagon. The voice on the other end was careful, measured. "General Williams, we have a developing situation. We can't discuss details over this line, but your promotion ceremony may have some additional attendees. Please ensure your dress uniform is regulation perfect." I'd assumed they meant foreign dignitaries or congressional members. I should have known better. In 28 years of service, I'd learned that the biggest moments often came disguised as small details. Now, standing on the tarmac as Marine One settled onto the runway, I understood. The President of the United States stepped out, followed by the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and a small army of Secret Service agents. General Williams, The president extended his hand as he approached. I apologize for the dramatic entrance, but when I heard about your promotion, I insisted on being here personally. Sir, I managed, accepting his handshake. Walk with me, he said, gesturing toward the waiting motorcade. We have a lot to discuss. As we walked, he spoke quietly. I've been reviewing your record. The classified operations, the leadership assessments, the recommendations from every commander you've served under. Do you know what stands out? No, sir. Perfect success rate. 0 unnecessary casualties. Innovation under pressure. And something else, loyalty from your troops that borders on legendary. Major General Banks told me his soldiers still talk about the time you carried Sergeant Martinez for miles through enemy territory after he lost his leg to an IED. I remembered that day. The blood. The weight. The snipers. The choice between leaving him and risking the mission. It hadn't been a choice at all. Sir, any leader would have. No, he interrupted. They wouldn't have. That's why I'm here. He stopped walking, turned to face me. General Williams, I'm not here just for your promotion to general. I'm here to inform you that in 6 months, when General Morrison retires, I'll be nominating you as commander of CENTCOM, full operational command of all U.S. military operations in the Middle East. The world tilted slightly. CENTCOM, the most complex, challenging command in the U.S. military. The position my father had once called the pinnacle of warrior leadership. Sir, the Joint Chiefs unanimously recommended you. The Senate Armed Services Committee has already indicated their support. You'll be the first woman to hold the position, but more importantly, you're the best officer for the job. We reached the ceremony hall, where hundreds of officers had assembled, now understanding this was no ordinary promotion. As I took my place on the stage, I saw the news cameras, the Pentagon press corps, the faces of soldiers I'd served with over the years. The ceremony proceeded with military precision. When the president himself pinned the 4th star on my shoulder, the room erupted in applause. But it was his words that would echo across every news channel by evening. General Catherine Williams represents the best of American military leadership. She has led from the front in every conflict of the past 2 decades. Her innovative strategies have saved countless American and Allied lives. And in 6 months, she will assume command of CENTCOM, because in the United States military, leadership doesn't check gender. It checks results. The applause was thunderous. I stood there, for stars on my shoulders, the weight of future command settling over me, and thought about a stubborn colonel in Texas who'd spent my whole life telling me what I couldn't do. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since the president's announcement. Congratulations from fellow officers, messages from soldiers I'd led, media requests. But I didn't check any of them until after the reception, when I finally had a moment alone in my office. 47 missed calls. All from one number. I stared at the screen, then set the phone aside. There would be time for that conversation later. Right now, I had a command to prepare for. That evening, as I sat in my quarters reviewing briefings for my new position, my aide knocked. Ma'am, there's someone here to see you. Says he's your father. I looked up from the classified documents. He flew here. Drove, ma'am. Says he's been driving for 18 hours straight. I found him in the waiting area, still in his travel clothes, looking every one of his 73 years. When he saw me, he stood slowly, his eyes taking in the 4 stars, the ribbons, the soldier his daughter had become. Katie, he said, his voice rough. General Williams, I corrected quietly. He flinched. I saw the news. The president. CENTCOM. He trailed off, seemed to gather himself. I was wrong. I waited. I was wrong about everything. About women in combat. About you. About what real leadership looks like. His hands shook slightly. I've been a fool, and a stubborn one. I let my pride and my old ideas rob me of knowing who you really are. And who am I? I asked. He met my eyes. A better soldier than I ever was. A leader who does what I only talked about. My daughter, who I failed to see and failed to support. The silence stretched between us, years of dismissal and disappointment filling the space. I don't expect forgiveness, he continued. I just wanted to say it to your face. And to tell you that I'll be watching when you take command of CENTCOM. Proudly. I studied him for a long moment. The man who'd built walls between us with every dismissive comment, every ignored achievement, every reminder that I didn't belong. But also the man whose service had first inspired me, whose footsteps I'd followed even when he tried to redirect my path. I have a briefing in 10 minutes, I said finally. But there's a coffee shop on base. Maybe we could talk. Really talk. For the first time. His eyes filled. I'd like that, General. As we walked toward the door, he paused. Katie? That text this morning. I'm sorry. I was scared. Scared of what? Of admitting that everything I believed, everything I taught was wrong. Of realizing that while I was telling you what women couldn't do, you were out there doing it anyway. 6 months later, I stood in the CENTCOM Operations Center, taking command of military operations spanning 20 countries. The weight of responsibility was immense. Thousands of American lives, regional stability, strategic partnerships, all resting on decisions I would make. My father had kept his word. He'd watched the change of command ceremony, sent a simple message afterward. Leading from the front. Proud of you, General. But more importantly, I'd kept my own word. The promise I'd made to myself as a 7-year-old girl in Fort Bragg, staring at walls covered with photos of a war I'd never fight in. I'd become the soldier I'd dreamed of being. Not in spite of the doubts thrown my way, but forged by them into something stronger. My aide appeared at my shoulder. Ma'am, the Joint Chiefs are ready for your first operational briefing. I nodded, straightened my uniform, and stepped forward into the command I'd earned. One decision, one mission, one saved life at a time. Because leadership doesn't check gender. It checks results. And mine